The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. The real estate crisis continues, says Michael Geller. The Prime Minister has made it one of his key priorities. He said he wants to double annual housing production by getting into the business of building. One of his first moves was to appoint former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson to Cabinet as Minister of Housing, Infrastructure, and Communities of Canada. He's an interesting choice for that role, says Geller. His record on housing when he was the mayor is spotty. He's often blamed for dramatic increases in housing prices, which may not be fair. After being appointed minister, Mr. Robertson was asked if housing prices should be lower. He flatly said no. The Prime Minister quickly jumped in to say, well, it's not a yes or no question. I agree it is not a yes or no question, Geller says. It's remarkably complicated. Much of what the Prime Minister is proposing has merit. But the question is, what exactly is needed to tackle the housing issues? I invited Michael Geller to join me for a conversation that matters about Canada's woes and how we go about tackling them in the real estate sector. Michael, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
You know, I took a look back at the interview that we did about 8 years ago on this very topic, and really it was on the cusp of, are we in a crisis? And I asked you, are we in a crisis? Yep. And you said, yes, I believe we are, and you were right. Are we still, and I started off this introduction.
I should also mention that I suggested we need to look at things like gentle densification.
Oh yeah, I was going to get to that. I'm watching that and I'm going, my gosh, was Premier Eby and Ravi Kahlon watching this interview years ago, going, oh yeah, we can do all that, because you talked a lot about laneway housing and so on. But, you know, I started off this interview by asking, are we still in a crisis?
We're in a bigger crisis now than we were 8 years ago.
How can that be? You know, Bob Rennie, when he was on Carol Taylor's Journal, was talking about the fact that last year there were more than 62 announcements from the feds, the province, and cities about improving the housing situation in British Columbia and in Greater Vancouver in particular, and yet we're still in a crisis.
I think we've got problems because of the unintended consequences of many of those government initiatives. I mean, the public encouraged the government to get rid of foreign buyers, get rid of investors, don't allow short-term rentals, don't allow empty homes, don't allow people to own second homes when others don't even have one. And all of that has conspired to essentially take all of the investors out of the market. And we needed those investors because the way our real estate market works in British Columbia, in order to finance a new development, the banks require you to pre-sell a certain percentage, perhaps half. And who was buying those pre-sales? The investors who we managed to get out of the market.
Well, we did a really good job of getting them out of the market. I remember listening to politician after politician labeling them all as being greedy, but they were essential.
And it's, as I heard a journalist say the other day, it's kind of ironic. After years of saying we need to get rid of foreign buyers, now people are saying maybe we better start allowing foreign buyers to come back into the market. Because the truth is, yes, there's no doubt back 15 years ago, foreign buyers, particularly from China, were raising the price of single-family houses in the west side of Vancouver and in Richmond and so forth. But they were also investing in real estate. They weren't a major player when it came to the pre-sales, but they were part of the market. And right now, as I'm sure you're going to hear from everyone you speak to, the condominium market in Vancouver is dead, the investment market is dead, and even the rental market, after years of not building any rental, some people are saying, you know what? I think we might be oversupplying the market.
I know, it's remarkable. 2 years ago, we were talking about the fact that nobody was building purpose-built rental, and now we're going too much, and prices are dropping. So then the pro forma for developers doesn't make sense, so they stop building.
As you and I discussed when we were on a panel with the Mayor of Burnaby and Bob Rennie and others, there are 43,400 units of housing approved at various stages in Surrey, which have not yet actually proceeded.
Well, and the mayor of Burnaby also pointed out that he had thousands upon thousands of permits that hadn't even been picked up from City Hall.
25,000 units in Burnaby. So we have this very odd and difficult to explain situation. On one hand, we say we need housing. We've got literally tens of thousands of units that have been approved but have not proceeded. And meanwhile, you read yesterday that there's 2,000 completed and empty condominiums in Vancouver, and that's expected to increase to 3,500 by the end of the year.
And do they get stuck with an empty home tax?
Some of them do. The ones in the large projects do not. But the ones in the small projects, somebody who's actually following through on doing gentle density with 4 units in a lot, if they can't sell those homes within a prescribed time frame, they have to pay that tax.
Oh my gosh.
And
so
that's
going to scare away more investors.
It does. And it also is not just investors. It's going to deter the small builders, precisely the people. And now you and I are going to have a chat about how realistic is it to double the number of housing starts in Canada in the forthcoming years, and doing a number of other things. Some of which I think, by the way, are reasonably well thought out initiatives. But others, I'm afraid, are not that different from saying, elect me and I'm going to end homelessness in 7 years.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Take a look at the man who has now been appointed as our housing minister, who said, elect me and I'll do away with homelessness. And he didn't. And he wears that because he took it upon himself. Does that have to be part of the mandate right now of the Minister of Housing?
Well, certainly ending homelessness and addressing street homelessness, I think it's one of the most significant issues across Canada. And what surprises me is I often think it's just in downtown Vancouver and maybe downtown, but you go to small communities throughout British Columbia, you go to small communities across Canada, even communities which have severe winters, and they have problems with homelessness.
Go to Lethbridge in the winter and there are people out on the street.
Yeah. And as we've discovered recently, it's starting to manifest itself in different ways, increased crime and so forth. And people who've got dual diagnosis, drug addiction, mental illness on the streets. So I think definitely that has to be. And it's interesting, in 1974, 50 years ago, I came to Vancouver with CMHC. And one of the things I was doing, I was in charge of the social housing program for a while, was looking at how to create more housing in the downtown east side. And for the first time in the history of Canada, CMHC actually started renovating some of the SROs because we knew you couldn't just build new units. You had to have a multifaceted approach. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because
so do you believe that the new minister, the former mayor of Vancouver, has that mandate to be able to make those kinds of changes and redirect the resources of, let's say, CMHC to start to address this problem?
No, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, some of the things that are being proposed by Mark Carney, and I have to declare, I think the guy's terrific. I voted for him. I was so relieved when I heard that he was going to run. So I have a lot of faith in him. But that said, I am surprised by some of the things that he is proposing, and I am a little bit concerned about it, in part because of the fact that I did spend those 10 years at CMHC.
So do you believe that through housing policy we can address the homelessness issue?
Yes, we can.
But how do we do that?
Oh, it's so many different approaches, including everything from providing more housing to promoting family reunification, thinking about programs to help people perhaps go back to those homes that they left because, oftentimes for good reason. But I did a little bit of volunteering when I returned to Vancouver in 2007 with Milton Wong and number of people in the downtown east side, and I learned there were a variety of approaches that were needed. It wasn't just building more housing, although that's essential.
So going back to can we build more housing, the Prime Minister has said, we're going to significantly increase the volume of new homes that enter the market. Is that even possible?
I was thinking as I drove down here, if he had said, next year we're going to increase the number of homes built across Canada by 10%, and in 2 years we're going to increase it by 20%, and in 3 years by 30%, I would have much more faith in our ability to do that than to simply say within the next year or two we're going to double the number of homes. Because when I worked at CMHC back in the 70s, we were building more housing across Canada than we have been in the last few years, and the population today is double what it was 50 years ago.
Why were we able to build more housing then than we are today? Is it because of the complexity of the modern home and the permitting process? Or is it that we don't have the human resources to be able to produce that volume of housing?
You've obviously been reading a lot of housing reports, because it's precisely that. It is a combination of things. In many municipalities, it's just difficult to get the approvals, even though another mayoral candidate promised a program called 3-3-1. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to approve small projects in 3 days or 3 weeks, and larger ones in 3 months, and the more complex ones in 1 year. And that was as naive at the time as saying I'm going to end homelessness in 8 years. That's a problem. But we should not ignore the fact that the labor force is aging, and we do not have the human resources, to use your term, to build housing, which is why I am very supportive of the Prime Minister's interest in looking at more factory production. Although, again, a topic I've had a long-standing interest in, but I'm also a little bit more cautious.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Well, that prefab home, you go, okay, I can see how it works. And there are companies out there that do that, and they do it quite successfully. There's other ones that have tried that our former mayor have been involved with that didn't succeed.
That's right.
What are the challenges with being able to do that kind of production and actually get it out into those areas where it's needed?
There's several problems, and we're actually dealing with them. I just came back from a manufactured housing conference in Penticton. There, the Mayor Burnaby was there speaking because he's chairing a mayor's task force looking at how to simplify the approval process for manufactured housing. That's a positive thing. The other thing that we talked about was financing. One of the real problems with manufactured housing that most people don't know about until they try it is when you build a conventional type of building, when the pieces of lumber are literally arriving on site. When that piece of lumber arrives on site, someone would come and inspect, and if it's there, they would advance you money month by month to pay for the materials. When you're building a home in the factory, the lender won't give you advance you the funds until that home is on the site. And so there's a practical problem that most people haven't really thought about. Now, the industry is looking at ways of providing surety bonds and other forms of security. When I started in manufactured housing, the biggest problem was inspections. The inspector in Vancouver said, I'm not going to Penticton to inspect. Well, now we have accredited third-party inspectors, so we've solved that problem. So they are issues, but we can deal with them. But I was in the Moduline factory in Penticton. They told me they have capacity to build 800 homes a year, and they're doing 200 homes. Why? The demand isn't there. And also, and this surprised me, he says, we can't even get the workers with the more modest level of expertise required to build homes in a factory. So it's similar to the problem of building on site. Too many of our construction workers have moved on, and we haven't been educating enough people in the trades.
On the financing side around prefab homes, is that where the government can play a role in helping those manufacturers be able to get over that hurdle? Because if you don't have the money to get from initial stage through to payment, it's not going to happen.
No. The government doesn't necessarily have to give them the money.
But it has to
work
assurances.
work with the lenders, as it has done over the years. I mean, is quite a complicated topic as to how CMHC insures loans that come from private lenders, but that has been really how we have done it. They've been guaranteeing loans, as you say, and that has made our system work. Without CMHC guaranteeing those loans, insuring loans, we wouldn't have been able to build as many homes as we have built.
So one of the topics that I want to talk to you about is it's interesting. We go back to that interview that we had 8 years ago, and we talked about laneway homes, which was in essence adding another unit on the same lot. Well, now the Premier's come along and said, well, you can build 4 on that same piece of land. But the cost of building 4, especially based on the way that we build homes today, pretty significant investment for anybody to make.
Yeah.
Is that the wise way to go? Or can we say, yeah, but you can, through prefabrication, wind up with 3 or 4 units in this space, and it can reduce the risk and the cost?
And at the manufactured housing conference, they had on display factory-built modular approaches to putting 4 or 6 units on one lot. So that is coming. But to be fair, we're not going to add 250,000 homes across Canada just simply by gentle densification and factory production. We're going to have to look at a variety of approaches.
So what kind of energy from the minister is it going to take for us to be able to do these things?
Well, I think he's got to be realistic. And as you pointed out in the introduction, he perhaps was too realistic when he said to people, don't worry, we're not going to bring down the price of your home.
Because that's a legitimate concern
it's
for many.
It's a very legitimate concern, and I think if we were being brutally honest, if I had been running for office this time, I would have said, vote for me and I'll make sure the value of your house does not go down to those of you who already own homes. But the reality is that's not really the target of audience that we need to think the most about. We need to think about all those people who are looking to buy homes or even looking to rent homes, decent homes at prices they can afford.
So let's say we go, okay, well, no, we're actually going to flood the market. And there is a reaction that goes, well, if you flood the market, you're going to bring down prices naturally anyways. Well, not necessarily, because the demand continues to rise, and I'm not sure that we can continue to meet that demand.
Yeah, and it's also a question of, people often say to me, how's the housing market? And I said, well, there actually isn't a housing market. There's a single family market on the west side of Vancouver. There's a multifamily market in Burnaby. There's a co-op housing, government subsidized co-op housing market in New Westminster and so forth. And that's the way you have to look at
Markets.
You've got to look at all of these different markets. And so where the greatest need is, in my mind, is what I was doing back in 74, 75, funding the Society for Christian Care of the Elderly to build an 80-unit nonprofit rental project in Burnaby. Sadly, I think part of our problem today is those years from 1993 onwards when the federal government completely got out of funding nonprofit rental, nonprofit co-ops. And that's the area I would like to see the most money being diverted towards, because that is a way of housing people who are in greatest need, and in no way does it impact the value of somebody's condominium that they bought 3 years ago with a down payment from their parents, and they're hoping that the value of that home is not going to drop.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. We talked about the fact that there are not investors entering into the market right now. Is there value in revisiting the MERB program?
Yes. Actually, I put together a list of the 6 or 7 things that Mark Carney and Gregor Robertson are talking about doing. And one of them is reintroduction of the MERB program. I had an involvement with that in the late 70s, early 80s, because I was working for a private development company that was building MERBs. And the way it worked, for those people who don't know what we're talking about,
right.
is doctors and dentists Just like registered retirement savings plans, when you put money into a plan, you got a tax deduction, plus you had some money that would hopefully appreciate over time. The MERP program encouraged private investors to put money into rental projects, and they got a tax write-off.
Right,
and
which you can't do right now. There's no tax legislation that allows you to do that.
That's right. And so it will, in some ways, prompt some acts by people that aren't totally rational, because sometimes, just like putting your money into an RRSP, sometimes it wasn't completely rational, but you were encouraged to do it. I think that is a good idea. It will get more people investing in projects. Now, that said, we also have to make sure that the cost of building those projects and the rents that can be charged when they're finished are somehow going to balance out. And that's a problem we have right now. Stu, as you've probably read, there are in the order of 20,000 rental units being proposed in various stages along the Broadway corridor of Vancouver. 20,000 just along the Broadway corridor. And I know many of the people proposing these, and they're all assuming that when they're finished, they'll be able to get a rent around $5.50 per square foot per month. So in other words, an 800 square foot home, that'll be renting for $4,400. Now, the reality is, when all of those units do come online, if they do come online, the rent won't be $5.50. People will be competing. Or if it's $5 a foot, because people don't want to drop it too much, you'll get 14 months rent for the price of 12. And that's what's happening right now. Right now, notwithstanding what we thought was a shortage of rental housing, many of the landlords who've recently completed projects are giving basically 2 free months and hoping that 14 months from now, those people will like their home enough to stay on rather than move to another unit where they can get 14 months for the price of 12.
Okay. So going back to the beginning of this conversation, is going to be a short answer because we're out of time. Do you believe the current minister, former mayor of Vancouver, Gregor Robertson, is up to this challenge?
Yes, because I think he's going to have learned from his mistakes, and I think he's going to have a lot of people around him giving him good advice. And I would like to think that, given his experience as a MLA, his years at the city of Vancouver, and now this new role, he will be willing to listen to the advice he's getting from people. It's not one person who does it on their own.
No, it's not. And he's going to have a reasonably good relationship here in British Columbia with Premier Eby. So, Michael, very generous of you to be so magnanimous in your appraisal of our minister. Thank you very much for coming in and having this conversation with me.